A 999 call is received in the morning and a woman is making the call to say her neighbour believes his partner may have died. She says he thinks that the partner isn't breathing and may have suffocated.
A few minutes later, paramedics arrive on the scene. When they get there, they identify the woman as Susan Nicholson. Rigor mortis has already set in and her face has turned purple, so she's clearly been dead for a few hours.
There were signs that people had been drinking, such as bottles around the living room. For the police officers attending this scene, they didn't treat the incident as particularly suspicious or consider it particularly out of the ordinary. Susan Nicholson had separated from her husband and moved down to Worthing. They had 2 children.
Susan had a successful career working for a number of banks in London and was a loving mother to her 2 sons.
Susan suffered from alcoholism and started to attend a support group for alcoholics in the Worthing area. It was when she was at this support group in Worthing that she met Robert Trigg, and the pair of them started to build a relationship.
Robert Trigg was a father of 1 child. He was a chef and he was also a cleaner part-time.
He was also an alcoholic. He had a lot of problems with drink. A lot of his relationships with women revolved around alcohol.
At 46, Trigg was 6 years younger than Susan, but the pair hit it off and their relationship developed quickly.
When they left rehab, they did continue to stay together. Susan came into some money and she bought a flat, and they both moved in together.
Generally, her life was going better than it had been for a few years. She was getting over the breakdown of her marriage. She'd got a new relationship.
So it seemed to be going very well. She even introduced him to her parents, Elizabeth and Peter.
They bumped into each other in a charity shop where Susan was working in the town centre. Susan's parents were slightly concerned on meeting Trigg the first time because he seemed to be under the influence of alcohol quite early in the morning. Susan's parents knew she'd struggled with alcohol, and they could see that her new partner was suffering some of the same demons.
As the months went by, cracks began to appear in their relationship.
The pair obviously had a sort of dysfunctional relationship in that they obviously drank together. It created quite a volatile situation. By April, there were obvious signs that Susan Nicholson and Trigg regularly drank together. The pair were seen out buying alcohol, and Trigg was spotted by a neighbour staggering around in the driveway outside their home.
They seemed to be used to seeing them drunk or drinking, and for them to go and buy 2 bottles of vodka and plan an evening of drinking probably wasn't out of the ordinary for them.
Emergency services received a call from a woman saying her neighbour had found his partner unconscious on the sofa.
Is she awake?
No, she's not. He told me he's not.
She's not, and she's not breathing?
No, that's what she said.
Okay, and did he find her like this?
Yeah, he literally phoned me. I was still in bed asleep, and he phoned me just now saying, I think Sue's dead, so I came down, and he's just told me that she is.
Yeah, all right. Okay, could you ask him just to tell you why he thinks she looks like she's dead?
Rob, why do you think she's dead?
I think it could be suffocation.
He thinks it could be suffocation.
Okay, and what? From what?
From what?
We both crashed out on the sofa last night. I woke up this morning. I had that way. She was down.
Right. Okay. Did you?
No, I didn't hear what.
They both crashed out on their sofa last night. Rob woke up with his head at one end, but Sue's face was like in the middle of the sofa, you know, where the cushion's joined.
In an initial call like that, the operator will be trying to get as much information as they can. You can hear the operator being a bit confused. You can hear in the background of the call a man's voice. This turned out to be Robert Trigg. Emergency services maybe thought that he couldn't make the call himself and that he was in shock.
The emergency services may have expected they were going to a fairly routine death call.
Although the call went to the ambulance department, the fact that there was a death would mean that police would automatically be called.
The woman's body was found on a smallish two-seater sofa in the middle of the room.
They noticed that there were 3 empty vodka bottles at the address, and maybe they thought that the alcohol could have contributed to her sudden death.
Officers took a witness statement from Robert Trigg at the scene.
Robert and suffocate in the middle of the night.
Susan was only 52. She didn't have any obvious health issues that could have caused her to die as she did. How did she die?
Following Susan Nicholson's death, her body was removed and sent for a post-mortem.
I was asked to attend an address in Worthing and take a statement from a resident living in the flat above. When I arrived, Susan had been taken away and there was nobody there in the flat itself. I noticed it was a nice flat. There was even a nice fresh bowl of fruit on the table. There was no sign of any scuffle or anything like that. Nothing was broken. Coincidentally, there was a receipt from a hairdresser's that took my attention. She had had her hair done the day before she had passed away. Because I recognised the hairdressers that she went to was the same as the one I would go to, it kind of brought it home a little bit more, really.
A statement was then taken from the neighbour who had called 999.
The young lady that lived in the flat above Susan Nicholson's flat was visibly shocked and very upset, bless her. She told me that Susan was her friend and she kind of took her under her wing a bit and looked after her. She said Robert Trigg was living with Susan and that they often had arguments that she could hear.
The case was passed to the coroner.
It's very difficult, in my opinion, for someone to be asphyxiated in the way that Robert Trigg is described. But there's not very much evidence to indicate another reason why Susan may have died at that time. And therefore, he is given the cause of death as being due to accidental smothering.
The news came as a huge shock to Susan's parents.
Mr. and Mrs. Skelton were very unhappy that this case was being closed. They couldn't understand how their daughter could have met her death. How was she accidentally smothered? How could this have happened to them or to anyone?
Susan's parents pressed for answers. Despite their daughter's death being ruled as non-suspicious, they discovered that this was not the first time police had dealt with Trigg.
Shockingly, they found out that one of Trigg's previous girlfriends had died in similar situation as their daughter Susan.
Julie Cox had been one of the uniformed officers who attended that scene.
The partner, Robert Trigg, I had encountered 5 years before at another scene of another sudden death. I felt that it was very unusual for one person to be involved in 2 sudden deaths, as it was. After taking the statement from the young lady in the flat above Susan Nicholson's flat, I returned to the police station and sort of said, that's really odd, isn't it? Same man and very similar circumstances, which does seem rather strange. I didn't have any more involvement. I believe that Robert Trigg was interviewed by other officers.
When Mr. and Mrs. Skelton found out that he had a partner who died in a similar situation, they found out that her name was Caroline Devlin. They wanted to ask more questions. They needed to know what happened, and they also needed to know what the links were between the two.
Caroline Devlin died in 2006, and her death was treated as non-suspicious. For 5 years, the case remained closed, until the death of Susan Nicholson drew new attention to the incident.
Caroline Devlin was a single parent. Her marriage had broken up, she had 4 children, and she moved to the Worthing area to be closer to her brother.
When they moved in, we knocked on the door and said, if there's anything you need, we're right next door. And she had a lovely family. She was a lovely lady. She was a very easy lady to get on with, very happy-go-lucky. Absolutely adored Caroline. In fact, the whole road was very protective towards Caroline. She was very friendly, but she had a kind of a vulnerability about her.
Caroline met Robert Trigg in a local pub in Worthing, and the couple began dating.
I knew that Caroline had a boyfriend, but we didn't learn anything much about him, which I suppose speaks volumes in itself.
She did mention him, but only in passing.
I'm nosy. So I did want to meet him, so it was nice that she brought him in to meet us. When we met Robert Trigg, I found him very much alpha male, but he seemed pleasant enough. She was well into him, obviously, and I was pleased for her that she got somebody.
The couple dated for nearly 3 years, but friends began to notice a change in Caroline's personality.
Sort of mellowed down a little bit, it wasn't quite so gregarious.
We weren't as close as usual. I wouldn't say she was withdrawn, but I didn't see so much of her.
Family and friends grew concerned, and in March 2006, just weeks before Caroline's death, they witnessed Trigg turn physical.
Trigg grabbed her arm aggressively. When her niece asked her about it later, Caroline said, it wasn't the first, it won't be the last. And prophetically, she said, I probably won't see my 40th.
It just came out of the blue. I don't think I'm going to live my full life. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to die young. It came out of the blue and she never said it again.
On the 25th of March, Caroline Trigg and a group of friends go to a pub nearby. They're having a good time. Then Trigg and Caroline goes to a neighbour's house.
They came in fairly late in the evening. And we knocked back quite a bit, I confess.
They weren't over amorous or anything like that, but they just sat next to each other, enjoying themselves. Trigg wasn't overly talkative, whereas Caroline was fairly chatty. That's how we spent the night.
They left at about 1 o'clock in the morning and went home to bed.
I arose between 8 and 9 o'clock. Went downstairs, started making the coffee. I was halfway through it, and a knock on the front door, and I could see one of Caroline's kids standing there, so I answered it. And he said, I can't wait, Mum. Can you have a look? I went next door. Trigg was sitting on the settee, staring at the floor, not saying a word. So I went upstairs to the bedroom. She was laying there. I sent the kids out of the room, downstairs. There was no physical marks on her, but it did seem strange that she was in bed with no sign of any bedclothes. I checked for signs of life, nothing. There was no signs of pulse or anything like that, so she was starting to discolour, which means she'd been dead a few hours.
She'd been with us happy and laughing just a few hours before, and now I'm told that she's dead. It just didn't seem real. It didn't seem possible.
One of the most shocking things about Caroline's death was that her death occurred on Mothering Sunday. her children found her on Mother's Day.
They cooked her a Mother's Day breakfast. Of course, when they went up to take it to her, they found her dead in bed. Well, I did ask Trigg if he'd phoned the service. He didn't seem to answer. He might have mumbled something, but I certainly couldn't understand it. So I phoned the emergency services, explained to them what had happened. They said, right, we'll send somebody out.
As emergency services made their way to the scene, Trigg appeared to get agitated.
I was very upset. I'd lost a very dear friend. So I was totally wrapped up in my own. I wanted to cry and I couldn't because I had to look after Robert. And I was worried for him because he was in a state of shock. He got that, what soldiers call the 1,000-yard stare. He was just off into oblivion. And he wanted to leave. And I said, you can't leave, Robert. You can't leave until the police have been and gone, because they may want to talk to you. You were with her when she died. You can't leave. And I was trying to reassure him, because he really was in a state of shock. It didn't occur to me that he was concerned for himself at that stage.
When paramedics arrived, they pronounced Caroline dead at the scene. Julie Cox was one of the first uniformed officers to arrive.
There was a man in the living room who identified as Robert Trigg. He was very cool and calm and collected. He was sitting down, smoking a cigarette, reading his newspaper, and that kind of surprised me, because if he was having a relationship with Caroline, then I would have expected him to at least be showing some sort of emotion, but he showed no emotion at all. That I thought a bit strange, but then I thought, well, people are different. I joined my colleague upstairs and found Caroline Devlin. I could see that she was naked on the bed. She had her feet where the pillow should be, and her head was at the feet of the bed, and she was laying on her front.
Caroline appeared to have been dead for a number of hours. Julie Cox, then a police constable, questioned Trigg about his movements that morning.
He got up, got dressed, and went to the newsagents and came back home again. He said that he'd got the eldest son to go upstairs and wake his mother up. But obviously Caroline was dead. I mean, I was a mum at the same time, and, you know, heaven knows what my two children would have done.
Caroline's son went next door and asked the neighbours to call the police.
I did think it strange that Robert hadn't called the police, but on the other hand, I think he was just quite simply in a state of shock, or I thought he was just quite simply in a state of shock. What would you do, you know? I don't know how I would have reacted if I'd woken up next to a dead person.
Caroline's death was deemed non-suspicious but unexplained, and referred to the coroner to determine cause of death.
The routine autopsy pathologist in this case had performed the post-mortem upon Caroline's body and found that there was bleeding within the head around the brainstem. And so they concluded that Caroline had an aneurysm which had ruptured and that had bled around her brain and caused her death.
Caroline's death was ruled to have been due to natural causes, and the case was closed.
It was a few weeks before we were told what they thought had happened to Caroline, and they said it was an aneurysm. It certainly fitted the circumstances, particularly as she'd been drinking. So we accepted it as one of nature's nasty freak accidents. Didn't think anything more of it.
It was certainly an unusual set of circumstances, but no one could have expected that a sudden death in Worthing could have turned into a double murder spanning several years.
5 years after the conclusion of the investigation into Caroline's death, the parents of Susan Nicholson couldn't understand why such a similar incident had not raised concerns about their own daughter's death.
If Trigg had been searched on the police national database, that should have played a part in the investigation and alerting the investigating officers of suspicions around Susan's death.
One key similarity involved Trigg's behaviour in the immediate aftermath of both incidents.
They've got 2 women who died whilst in his bed or on a sofa, and situations where, upon discovering their bodies, instead of, doing anything constructive, he goes to a shop.
After Susan had died, he'd phoned his brother at 8:33 in the morning. At 8:47, he spoke to his neighbour, who actually did call the police because he said that Susan was dead. But he didn't actually call police himself or call an ambulance at all.
And Susan's parents had more questions about Trigg's version of events.
They have their suspicions, primarily about the size of the sofa. 2 average-sized adults didn't seem to be able to comfortably sleep on this narrow sofa. Trigg is a heavy-set guy, weighs 15 stone. They didn't see how it was possible for 2 people to be asleep on this sofa at the same time.
We knew it wasn't an accidental death. So we couldn't give up because we knew that Trigg had murdered Susan.
In March 2012, less than a year after their daughter's death, Susan's parents discovered that Robert Trigg had sold his story to a magazine.
The Skeltons must have been devastated to see this article in which the man that they suspected of being involved in their daughter's death is playing the victim, effectively. They have to read details where he's claiming that they helped each other with their alcohol problems.
When I was with Susan, the world seemed a better place. I had no urge to drink.
He says that Susan wanted to marry him. This didn't add up for them because they knew that their daughter told them that she never wanted to get remarried again, and they'd heard evidence in the inquest about both of their heavy drinking.
We often slept covered up on the sofa. I had no idea it could be so dangerous.
But they knew that a previous girlfriend had also died in similar circumstances.
I keep asking the question, why? Why did the police do what they did? They gave Robert Trigg preferential treatment, and they treated Susan as if she was of no consequence.
For 4 years after Susan's death, the Skeltons put pressure on authorities to reopen their daughter's case.
They kept contacting Sussex police, asking for an investigation. They also wrote numerous times to the IPCC, who are the Independent Police Complaints Commission, but with the same result every single time.
We think the police and the authorities did let
fail
Susan
us,
down.
Yeah, they failed us and failed Susan.
Yeah.
After multiple failed attempts to get Sussex police to reinvestigate Susan's death, Peter and Elizabeth Skelton contacted a barrister to take a look at the case.
They were convinced that their daughter had been murdered, and so they were very anxious to see whether there's any other route they could take in order to push forward a prosecution. They were then in their late 70s, but they both had very strong minds. They felt like they were crying in the wilderness because it was almost like that the world had gone mad because it seemed so obvious to them that he was the killer.
I think what the Skeltons were trying to achieve is almost impossible. They are 2 normal people who have lost a child. For them to take on an institution to try and get justice for their daughter is no mean feat. And it takes a lot of courage, integrity, and fight.
They told me about Susan, for a start, and I'd already seen pictures of her and read about her, and she was obviously a really lovely woman. Lovely family, close family, lovely people. And they were able to point out certain features of what had happened that day and preceding that, which seriously alarmed them. The thing I really remember at the forefront of my mind was the sofa. It was a very narrow sofa, The dynamics of what he said had happened made absolutely no sense, because in order to have caused her to suffocate, it would have required something which didn't make sense, because he would have fallen off the sofa. The fact was that Sussex police had concluded that they were not simply going to reopen this investigation. And so the way to do this was to start a private prosecution.
It was a great relief. It was like opening up a new gate or a new door or something, because, you know, we waited for so long and we did so much hard work and the police weren't listening to us, and at last somebody took us seriously.
His original account to police, he had said that he was lying on the sofa with his back to the back of the sofa, and that she was next to him there. But then when he gave evidence at the coroner's hearing, he had to explain how it was that he got up at 2 o'clock in the morning, went to the toilet and came back again. And he said he got back into the same position. And of course, that would have meant waking her up. And he said that she had made no response. So he changed his account, and he said that he was now on the outside of the sofa, and so that was a completely different account.
Matthew Farmer was also told about a series of domestic incidents in the months leading up to Susan's death.
Where there is domestic violence, I think it is something that's absolutely fundamental to understanding who you're dealing with and to making decisions such as whether to treat someone as a suspect.
Across just 3 months, police were called twice when loud arguments were overheard coming from the flat. By their third visit, the situation had escalated.
When the police officers attended, they actually saw Susan with 2 black eyes, a swollen nose, a cut to her arm, and bruising to her chest. Trigg had no option on this occasion, so he had to say, "Yes, I caused those injuries."
Trigg received a caution for battery, and the attending officers were left concerned that Susan was in danger of further harm at his hands.
The officers recorded it as a moderate risk. It was downgraded to standard back at the station, even though she had all of those visible injuries. It was less than a month later that they would reattend, and she would be dead.
Despite growing evidence suggesting Trigg may have played some role in Susan's death, police refused to reopen the case. One key reason for this was Susan's autopsy.
The pathology report says that she's died from accidental smothering. So their investigation's finished. The police have already made their minds up.
That's a problem that had to be dealt with because he was the only expert witness in the case at this point. So what I advise they do is go to a Home Office pathologist called Dr. Nathaniel Carey, or Dr. Nat Carey.
He reviewed the original pathology report and concluded that the cause was deliberate.
Susan Nicholson's death has occurred from traumatic asphyxia. In other words, she has died because someone else has been applying pressure to her, deliberately.
There were imprint marks on her lips showing that extreme force had been used, and that could not have happened accidentally.
Dr. Carey also highlighted that it would be very unlikely for Susan to have been accidentally smothered in the way Robert Trigg described.
She wouldn't be able to breathe, so she would wake up and try and remove herself from that situation.
As soon as Nat Carey came up with that, the report from the previous pathologist that the police had used was not only neutralised, but there was a very strong opinion from an extremely eminent Home Office pathologist saying that the cause was deliberate.
For Mr. and Mrs. Skelton, this was a turning point. There was now enough to reopen the investigations.
Much to the relief of Susan's parents, Sussex police agreed to reinvestigate the deaths of both Susan and Caroline Devlin. Dr. Carey was asked to review Caroline's original post-mortem, which had ruled her death was due to natural causes.
He has identified that, in fact, she is unlikely to have died from a natural aneurysm. Dr. Carey concluded her death is due to a blow to the back of her head, causing a bleed around her brainstem. So after reviewing Susan Nicholson's death and also Caroline Devlin's death, he's identified that there are suspicious activity in both deaths.
There are years of looking at these two reports together. The similarities in how they died, how they were found, and their partner. You cannot ignore those coincidences. They are not coincidences. They are something that has happened because of that common denominator, Trigg.
Robert Trigg was taken into custody and questioned under suspicion of murder. Julie Cox had already retired from the police when she heard the news.
It certainly gave me flashbacks as to my involvement with both incidents. As a police officer, unless I can see there's a knife sticking out their back, I'm not qualified to decide whether somebody has died naturally or any other way. So it's down to the pathologist to follow that up. But it did seem unusual for somebody to be involved with two deaths in that time. So I was glad that at least it was being reinvestigated under those circumstances. Hopefully justice was going to be done.
In light of Trigg's arrest, the 999 call reporting Susan Nicholson's death took on a more sinister edge.
Now, they'll probably be looking at it with a different view because whereas before they might have viewed him as a grieving partner, they might now look at him as a potential killer.
Is she awake?
No, she's not. He told me he's not.
She's not, and she's not breathing?
No, that's what he said.
Okay, and did he find her like this?
Yeah, he literally phoned me. I was still in bed asleep, and he phoned me just now saying, I think Sue's dead, so I came down, and he's just told me that she is.
The call itself is shocking. For me, it just sounds like he's very manipulative. Trigg is using people around him as a smokescreen. He's got somebody else who's going to tell the same story, and it's almost corroboration.
Okay, could you ask him just to tell you why he thinks it looks like she's dead?
Rob, why do you think she's dead?
I think it could be suffocation.
He wasn't asked that. He was asked, why do you think she's dead? And he sort of volunteered this narrative of suffocation, sort of out of nowhere.
He's implanting that idea into the heads of the first responders.
He thinks it could be suffocation.
Okay, and what? From what? What's from what?
We both crashed out in the surgery last night. I woke up this morning. I had that one issue.
He's talking about the position on the sofa and how they fell asleep and how he's ended up. It is almost like he's presenting his defence straight away.
And this is almost like a playbook where it worked for him in the past, and so maybe he thought that it will work again.
In December 2016, Trigg was charged with the murder of Susan Nicholson and the manslaughter of Caroline Devlin. Susan's parents were one step closer to justice for their daughter.
I was delighted. Their hard work now over 5 years had paid off.
They had plenty of opportunities to stop Robert Trigg because he had a history of violence going back years and years and years, you know. And so they could have stopped Robert Trigg well before he got to Susan.
The charges against Trigg came more than 10 years after the death of Caroline Devlin.
I'd got over the shock of her death, and now I was being told that there was a possibility that it wasn't a natural death after all. I thought back to the way he was reacting on the morning when he sat with me, and it had a totally different meaning. It fitted either scenario, whether he was shot because she died unexpectedly, or whether he was shot and wanted to get away because he'd actually been the cause and didn't want to get caught by the police. I was shocked that they hadn't looked into it. It took someone else dying in the same way to find out what had really happened to Caroline.
The trial of Robert Trigg began in June 2017 at Lewes Crown Court. If found guilty of murder and manslaughter, he faced life in prison.
It was important for prosecutors to link the deaths that were 5 years apart.
On both occasions, he went shopping. Those are not the actions of somebody who is distraught, who's just been through a traumatic experience. That's somebody who is planned, controlled, unemotional.
The only real differences between the two deaths was the manner in which Trigg killed them.
Susan Nicholson had died of traumatic asphyxia, and Caroline Devlin had died from a blow to the back of her head. The common denominator here is Robert Trigg. He's there when both women have died.
In order to back up the conclusion from the pathology reports, the prosecution needed to demonstrate that Trigg was a serial abuser.
Part of the prosecution's case was to submit what's called a bad character application. That's where prosecutors will apply to a judge to be able to bring up past crimes and police reports and anything that they think speaks to the character of a defendant.
Prosecutors presented the jury with evidence of multiple previous incidents with former girlfriends, where Trigg had become violent.
One of these incidents that prosecutors put to the jurors was that Trigg beat up another previous girlfriend so badly that she was in hospital for 3 weeks. During that incident, it was actually him that called police and said, "You have to come down here and arrest me or I'll kill her."
Caroline Devlin's neighbour was called to testify about Trigg's behaviour in the aftermath of Caroline's death.
I could not help thinking back to that morning and what he had been like, and it just all made total sense. He wasn't alarmed that somebody had died, he was alarmed that he had actually killed her.
And the cross-examination started. And that went on for quite a time, and eventually it concluded. I think the defence lawyers were not overly happy. Robert Trigg, yeah, he was subdued and sort of staring into space. I had to walk in front of him, where he'd been sort of leaning forwards and looking at the floor. He raised his head, sort of nodded, and a smile that was sort of hollow.
One major problem for the prosecution was the length of time that had passed since both deaths.
It would have been more difficult to provide real, tangible evidence, and the defence team would have used that to try and undermine that prosecution case.
One element of Trigg's defence centred on the number of years that had passed between the various domestic incidents highlighted by the prosecution.
He claimed that there wasn't as many abusive incidences as you might see in other cases. It was only a few incidents over a long period of time.
That is not an excuse, that is not acceptable. And even when you say there's a small number of incidents over a long period of time, a small number of incidents that were reported, but what about the ones that were not reported?
During the trial, Caroline's children testified. It must have been horrendous for them to have to go through that.
That to me is the most shocking thing. They're never going to forget seeing their own dead mother on Mother's Day.
What would you say to the families of the women that you killed? You sent children to find their mother's body.
Isaiah 50, verse 11. They should be in here, not me.
After a 10-day trial, it took jurors just 6.5 hours to convict Robert Trigg of the manslaughter of Caroline Devlin and the murder of Susan Nicholson. Robert Trigg was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 25 years.
Really, it's cost us a lot of sleepless nights.
Again.
We blame the police for this because we've told them for 6 years all the facts, but they just wouldn't listen.
A new inquest into Susan's death was opened. It looked at Sussex Police's investigation into Caroline's death and the way they responded to the information they had about Trigg prior to Susan's murder.
So the jury unanimously concluded that Sussex Police had information that should have alerted them to the fact that Robert Trigg posed a real and immediate risk to Susan Nicholson's life, and that the police had failed to take reasonable steps to protect her. The jury also found there were significant failings in the investigation following the death of Caroline Devlin.
We hope the Sussex Police will reflect on all the jury's conclusions and ensure that victims of domestic violence and their families are better treated in future.
Sussex Police accepted the findings of the inquest and apologised to the families of Susan and Caroline. They vow to improve the way in which they respond to cases involving domestic abuse.
It was a remarkable vindication of the Skeltons' long-standing and patient efforts to achieve justice for Susan and for the truth to come out. And of course, without Peter Elizabeth Skelton's determined campaign, the family of Caroline Devlin would never have discovered the truth about Caroline.
I will always remember Caroline as the most bubbly person I've ever met. She and I laughed a lot. And that's the way I will always remember her.
The job of the police is to keep our communities, our people, our families safe. The police failed, but what the Skeltons did, they took a...
You're in the hot seat now for some real serious offences.
Not interested in it. You're being accused of an armed robbery.
When a criminal strikes...
Money now. Open the till now. Listen to me. Do anything I perceive to be a threat to life to be shot, do you understand?
Terrified victims deserve justice.
To have something like this held to your throat, absolutely petrifying.
It's innocent people going about their day-to-day lives. They didn't deserve this in the slightest.
First, detectives must identify a suspect.
This lad, it's him.
Suspect's quite prolific. We really need to get this guy in custody.
Police, drop to your knees. Do not move. Right, you're arrest.
Game over for me now, isn't it?
Next,
Police.
they must hunt for concrete evidence.
Ooh, it's like George in the jungle in there.
That's him, isn't it?
Ah, perfect.
Then question the suspect face to face.
This is your opportunity. If you're going to tell us something, you tell us it now.
Did you put the knife to his throat?
Absolutely not.
What are we doing? Phone out there. You come up.
Get out of my way.
Will the evidence stand or fall?
That is that. That is that.
Will the suspect confess or deny everything? Will the police uncover the truth in time?
24 hours is a very limited period of time to carry out a full investigation.
Because time is ticking and we've got 8 hours left.
The best way to safeguard the public is to have the suspect in custody and remand them to prison.
Boom! All the charges, yes!
This time,
No! Smash my windows and everything. They're in my house.
a violent burglary and home invasion.
Literally in within a matter of seconds to go through something like that, it's just harrowing.
Detectives must find the gang before they strike again.
We're dealing with some really dangerous people in this investigation. We really need to get them into custody.
Homicide, please, what's the emergency? There's people in my house! Homicide, please, what's the emergency? Hello? There's flash runners and everything! They're in my house! Right, listen to me, what's your address, please? No! There's nothing here! Please help! Please! Hello? Hello?
Police trace the call, and as units are dispatched, another call comes in from the same property.
He just took it now.
Hello there. Sorry, what's going on?
5 men have just
booted my door off, smashed all my windows and assaulted me. They've assaulted me, missus. They've got my car. They've got my car. Yeah, they've just come in here with knives. There was loads of them.
All right, get your doors locked so nobody can come back in. We've got officers on the route, so you're okay.
How far away am I, mate?
The next
This one?
Yes.
The first unit arrives at the house where the violent assault and car theft has occurred. 2 adult victims have minor injuries, but are able to give statements to the police.
Over 5 males have come into the address with axes and bats. The house is absolutely ransacked and they've come through the window. The male party's been caught on his hand by grabbing the knife from the offenders. They've punched the female, she's got a black eye.
The victims describe barricading themselves into their bedroom as the masked men broke through a window and door and confronted them.
There's damage to an upstairs bedroom where they've used weapons to get through it, potentially using an axe to get through the bedroom door. They've taken the vehicle keys and left in his vehicle.
Right.
They've taken the female's phone as well.
Right.
They're just trying to get it on Track My iPhone to see if we can get a location for the phone.
Right.
Yeah, these offenders have also made threats towards the male and female party.
Disgusting.
I know, it's sickening.
Do we know who it is?
I'm going to get photographs, okay?
Officers must act fast to find any leads that could help identify the suspects.
They've gained entry through the window, got damage to 2 front windows. There is blood inside the address, it's on the banister. There is also a sledgehammer outside the front of the property. And there is a vape underneath the window where the broken one is.
Shortly after the home invasion, police track the victim's stolen phone to an industrial estate.
None of you have touched this, have you? No.
With the serious and violent nature of the crime, detectives from Scunthorpe CID have arrived at the scene and are being briefed by officers.
So there's a sledgehammer out front there. So they've come through this window. That vape pen belongs to the suspects because they don't vape. Right. It's come out of their pocket. It's not been touched. I've got photographs of it in situ. Right. So this potentially could be suspect or victim's blood. He has grabbed hold of the knife that they've had and he has got a minor cut. It's potentially the victim's, but we can't rule out whether or not it belongs to the suspect. I'm not 100% sure. So that's been secured. It's not been touched. It's got photographs. They've then got through the main bedroom, potentially using an axe to get through the bedroom door.
So what have they taken?
They've taken the car.
Why have they taken it in this address?
I don't know. The CCTV's up here though.
The home has CCTV covering the front of the property.
Is this one of the offenders? If we can play it, just play it through. There.
Jesus. How many was there?
.43 just for the log as well. There is CCTV at this property and it has captured the suspect gaining entry and leaving.
It's now clear there are 5 attackers. But the question detectives must answer quickly is who are they? In Humberside,
I haven't got any money.
There's nothing here.
a violent burglary involving an armed gang has left a family traumatised.
Over 5 males have come into the address with axes and bats. The house is absolutely ransacked.
So, please can you have a look at log 508 of yesterday, please, which is an aggravated burglary.
Due to the serious nature of the crime, the case has been escalated to CID. Leading the investigation is Detective Sergeant Anthony Stead.
5 males have gone to a targeted address. They've got with them knives, an axe and a sledgehammer. The lads get inside, they assault the victims, and then they've stolen victims' phone, and one of them has gone downstairs and picked up 2 vehicle keys. One of the males goes outside, unlocks it, drives off. Victim got like a bust lip and some other bruising to his face, and then our female victim's got a cut just to the side of her eye where she was hit with the back of one of the knives. The outstanding actions, of which there are a lot. Forensics, so one of the actions will be to see what we can fast track. House-to-house and CCTV around the offence location, please.
Yeah.
If you can get the 999 calls today, that would be brilliant, because apparently they're very impactful.
And we've literally got nothing on any of the 5 suspects.
Nothing.
Detectives must try and establish if there was a motive behind the attack.
Homicide, please, what's the emergency?
I haven't got any money.
Please, there's people in my house. Just let me go. Please! Homicide, please, what's the emergency? Hello? There's people in my house! Smashing my house!
I haven't got any money.
We can hear on that call that they've gone there looking for money. It could be the wrong house that they've picked on. It could be a debt that's owed. It could be anything.
Right, listen to me. What's your address, Lee? I don't know who they are. They just smashed my windows and everything. They're in my house. No! There's nothing here! Please help! Please!
Listening to that 999 call is quite harrowing. You know, at that point, you can hear that family is in turmoil and they are absolutely scared out their wits' end. This could have gone really horribly wrong, where someone could have been really, really seriously hurt.
With the motive unclear, detectives need to identify the attackers before they strike again.
Good morning, my name's Jonathan, I'm calling from CID.
I'm just calling in regards to a burglary that occurred last night.
We're dealing with some really dangerous people in this investigation. There's not many people we deal with who would commit this level of violence and intrusiveness into another person's home and threaten them with weapons. The quicker we can get them off the streets, the better, to be honest.
So this is the front of the victim's address.
The CCTV of the gang committing the crime is now being reviewed.
1, 2, 5 males that have attended, well, 1 with visible weapons. That they've used a sledgehammer to smash the front window, but then they've prized it apart and climbed through quite rapidly, literally within a matter of seconds. A couple of strikes to the windows and then they're in. It has happened quite quickly. It's been quite a quick attack. And then the vehicle subsequently gets taken. I'm just going to re-watch the footage again just to try and ID any of the suspects. A couple of them are wearing quite distinctive clothing. Male 1 appears clearly quite forensically aware of everything. From the footage, he's got his face covered, he's got gloves on. And then male 2, I mean, these are quite distinctive, the trousers with the 2 reflective stripes. But he too's got gloves, face covering. Male 3, 4 and 5 are all literally gloved up, hoods very close, tight. They're all wearing gloves, so fingerprints wouldn't be obtained from anything. We don't have a great deal to go by.
The team are unable to identify the suspects from CCTV. But if they can find the stolen car or a potential getaway vehicle, it could help track them down. And statements taken from witnesses have provided a lead.
Witnesses described to us a blue box-type van arriving at the target address. 5 males alight from the van, and then the attack begins at the address.
A team of detectives are dispatched to search for more CCTV in a bid to track the van.
So if we can find the vehicle, either the stolen motor vehicle or the one that they used to come and go from the address, that would be really helpful. It probably was that van was used to transport some people there so that they could then take the victim's car and then they could both move off separate ways. It makes it more difficult for us to catch them, but not impossible.
Investigating an incident which happened up the road, and I've just seen you've got some cameras up. Do you have access to them at all?
Whilst officers are tasked with finding footage of the getaway vehicle and the stolen car, the team turn their attention to forensics. Can items found at the scene provide any clues?
In terms of CSI, there is blood on the banister.
Yeah.
They forensically recovered a vape pen that was inside the front living room. The sledgehammer that was used to cause damage and entry into the address is forensically recovered by CSI. I think our main opportunity there, boss, if you're in agreement, is probably the vape pen.
I would, depending upon the blood, I would agree.
Yeah.
Because I think the banister, it could quite easily be the victim's blood.
So we're going to be led by forensics, but that is in the process of being done this afternoon.
Both the sledgehammer and the vape will be sent off for forensic testing.
So this is the vape that's been located from the front room of the address. Both the homeowners, they've said neither of them smoke vapes, which would indicate that this has been left by a suspect.
The vape found at the scene is a particular focus of the forensic investigation.
The suspects were all quite forensically aware on entering the property. They've all covered their hands, so DNA from fingerprints is very minimal. However, we can obtain DNA from the mouthpiece of this vape. Hopefully there's some saliva or something that can be obtained. This will now go off to our forensic lab, hoping to get some DNA from it.
Detectives will have to wait for the results. But with an armed gang still on the loose, the team are urgently trawling through new CCTV footage that's been collected with the aim of identifying the blue getaway van.
I don't reckon that's his van.
You don't think it is?
No.
So we can discount that.
Oh, here we go.
One of the CCTV cameras has provided a lead.
So what have you got then?
So we've got, there. Van, it appears to be blue on here. Followed by what I would believe is probably the vehicle that they've taken from the address.
Is this the van carrying the violent suspects?
Are we able to say what that van is, do we think?
I don't know. I don't know if we'll get anything from that. The footage is quite... It's not clear enough to be able to slow it down.
Quite blurry, isn't it?
Yeah.
We really need to identify the van.
If this is the getaway vehicle, it's a major breakthrough in the hunt for the armed gang. Police are hunting a gang of suspects after a terrifying armed robbery at a family home.
Literally within a matter of seconds.
A sledgehammer and a vape, believed linked to the suspects, have been sent for forensic testing.
Oh, here we go.
Detectives have CCTV of a possible vehicle, and a mobile phone stolen in the burglary has been recovered.
None of you touched this, have you? No.
212, just having a look at.
The team now need to confirm the van is the one used by the gang.
This is the blue van, the target vehicle that's carrying the suspects arriving.
Using further CCTV, detectives have tracked the van's movements before and after the burglary.
This is showing the target vehicle arriving towards the victim's address. I think it's 9:24 when it arrives. So now we've moved on 5 or 6 minutes, and if we watch carefully, we get further footage which shows the target vehicle and the stolen vehicle leaving. That gave the suspects a period of time of approximately 5 to 6 minutes to commit the offence, which correlates with the 999 call that is placed by the female victim.
In establishing an accurate window of opportunity for the robbery to have taken place, the team now have good evidence this is the attacker's vehicle, but they still need to track it down. So they focus on the industrial estate where the victim's stolen phone was recovered.
At some point they've discarded the female victim's mobile phone, which we've managed to recover. So the location where the mobile phone was recovered from, there's a potential to yield better quality CCTV to try and identify the vehicle that the suspects arrived and left in.
So we're going to head down to that location, and then we're going to do some CCTV inquiries around that location just to see if we can find the vehicle in question. We need to discover the licence plate to that vehicle.
With multiple businesses at the location where the phone was recovered, can they generate any new leads?
So this is where the mobile phone was discarded. I just need to see if you've got any CCTV that covers the very front of this property.
We have CCTV, but we're on our generator, so when we finish on a weekend, there's no CCTV.
Right.
So.
Okay. So it wouldn't have captured anything at 9 o'clock. Right, okay. No problem. All right, cheers for that, thank you. I'll pop next door, see if they've got anything. Morning. Just from the police, from CID in Scunthorpe, have you got any CCTV outside at the front of here? There's been an incident late last night.
OK, well, we've got cameras. I'll show you outside. We've got one fake, you know, they cross.
Yeah. Would it capture anything on over there?
Not in good definition, but have you been to Parker's?
Not yet, no. I'm working my way, I'm doing a loop.
Parker's have got brand new CCTV in it.
OK, fabulous.
The officers have one last premises to try that has cameras overlooking the route the getaway van is believed to have taken.
I'm PC Panther from Scunthorpe CID. Okay. We're after looking at your CCTV, if that's possible. Is it you that I need to speak to?
I've got the camera.
Fabulous stuff, yeah.
I've got that one.
Right, I'll just sort of that.
Oh, OK.
That's up there looking.
Yeah.
When do you want to?
So, any time shortly after 21:27 last night. I'm just interested in trying to locate a licence plate of the car. Yeah. Oh, that might be it. 39:27. That's definitely around that.
CCTV cameras on the property have picked up a van just minutes after the suspects fled the scene.
There's a black car that's been taken from the address, which may or may not have been in convoy with that vehicle. See, our digital forensic unit might be able to slow it all down and pick up
go in a bit,
pick up a VRM from the footage. Thank you so much. Yeah.
They won't know if they can obtain a licence plate number from the footage until they can analyse the clip back at the station.
have located the van on its own and not in convoy with the car, which would suggest the vehicle maybe turned right and the van's gone in the direction of the left.
Could the vehicles have split up in an effort to evade the police?
Now I've got it on a larger screen. The quality's not going to be good enough to be able to obtain the licence plate from the van, unfortunately.
It's a setback for the investigation. And DS Stead meets DI Archer to discuss the next steps.
We've been out to where the mobile phone was discarded from the female victim.
Yeah, the deposition site for the mobile phone.
Yep. We have recovered some CCTV.
Yeah.
However, the vehicle can be seen from reasonably far away. You can't make out the make and model clearly or the VRM.
Yeah. So we've got some forensic samples that have been sent off. We just need to ensure that the forensic lab are given direction that we need those back as quickly as we can to identify who's committed this offence. We need to chase them, put some pressure on them.
Yeah, of course, no problem.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
The team have sent a vape and a sledgehammer found at the scene to be forensically tested. The items could reveal crucial DNA profiles of the suspects.
Oh, hi Debbie, it's Becky from CID in Scunthorpe. I'm just ringing to chase up a DNA hit, just to see if you've got any results on it. Right, okay. Thank you so much, see you later. Bye. Bye. No result as yet. She said it was on a 48-hour turnaround, which I should get something back this evening.
The team will have to wait.
We've not been able to ascertain anything from any of this CCTV so far, so we are really hanging our everything on the DNA that comes back from the lab, should anything come back from there. If we get nothing back from the forensic submissions lab, we still won't have anybody.
I need to find out who these 5 people are. They're clearly very dangerous. But it's just a waiting game now.
Will the lab results provide the breakthrough they need?
PC Panthers, Scunthorpe CID. Oh, fabulous stuff. All right, thank you so much. Bye. Bye. They found a profile on the blue vape that was left within the address.
A search of the police database has come back with a DNA match.
The profile that we've got back, it matches a male by the name of Graham Green. We've got a profile on the vape and then a mixed profile on the sledgehammer. He's from County Durham. County Durham's a fair distance from here, so I don't know what connection he's got to the Scunthorpe area or if he's got any connection to anybody in our area. He's obviously been known to the police with his offending history.
With a track record of violent offences and his DNA being found on several objects at the crime scene, Graham Green is now suspect number 1.
So now we've got a name for this guy. He's been circulated on our police database. That gives us the opportunity to contact County Durham's constabulary and then ask for active arrest attempts from their force at the known address that we have for him.
Police search for Green at his last known address, but are unable to locate him. With a violent offender on the loose, his name is circulated with forces across the country. Police fear he has gone to ground. until a call from a neighbouring force comes in.
Graham Green, Graham Green was located at an address in Doncaster by a neighbouring force in South Yorkshire.
After being arrested for an unrelated offence, Green is linked to the violent home invasion and booked into custody.
Yeah, aggravated burglary. DB's been named by a police department as the victim's criminal with multiple other suspects and smashed the window with a sledgehammer. Assaulted multiple people at the address.
You've been in custody here before? No. You've been in custody at all before? He's got his right to come sometimes with the solicitor?
No, because I don't even know what's going on, like.
Police now have 24 hours to question and seek charges for Green, or they'll be forced to release him. PC Liam Greenwood is assigned the task of interviewing the suspect.
So this chap here with the sledgehammer, I believe is Graham Green. It would make sense why his DNA is on there. The front room is the living room, and that's where the vape was found. So obviously we suspect Graham is the one that's gone through the window with the sledgehammer. As he's gone in, if he's got vape in his pocket, obviously climbing through a window, that's ample opportunity for a vape to fall out and you not notice. So he's got previous for burglary and theft, criminal damage, got previous here for GBH, which is the highest level of assault, telling me that he's, you know, a violent individual. He's got multiple convictions for assault and burglary. You know, he's dangerous. He's the sort of person to do this. The first half of the interview is his part, so I want to get an account from him, what he has to tell me. Once I'm sort of happy that I've got his account, I start drip feeding in the evidence. He's opted not to have a solicitor, which means prior to interview, we don't have to disclose any of our evidence. So we'll be going into this interview and he won't know anything what we've got on him.
Detectives are now ready to interview Green. Will he admit playing a role in the attack? And will he name anyone else involved?
We're here in Bircham Way, across the suite in one of the interview rooms. So far you've opted to not have a solicitor or speak to one.
Yeah.
Can I ask why that is?
Because I don't think I knew when it was time of moment, so just see how it goes.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. So you've been arrested for aggravated burglary, and police inquiries have identified you.
I don't even know how that is even possible.
Okay.
They don't.
So can you tell me anything about this?
No, I can't tell you anything.
Okay, why is that?
I don't know anything.
You don't know?
No.
Okay, so on the 4th of February, can you tell me what you were doing?
I would have been at home.
You would have been at home?
Yeah, because I don't go anywhere.
Right,
I
okay.
didn't even leave Alpha. I literally done this is the first time I've left Alpha. The first time I went to Doncaster today with the police station.
Right, okay.
You know what I mean? First time I've left.
In how long?
Since I got here.
Since you got here?
Yeah,
which was
5 months.
5 months?
Yeah.
Okay.
So where did you live before?
Durham. Yeah.
So what's brought you to Donny?
I got evicted from my flat.
Oh, right, okay.
Do you know people from Scunthorpe?
No.
Do you know people that would go into Scunthorpe?
No.
No? Okay. So on the 4th of February, have you attended Scunthorpe at any point on that day?
No.
So I'm just going to show you some CCTV. This is where we see the 5 lads come, and that one's got a sledgehammer. You all able to tell me who anybody is in this footage?
No.
Are you in this footage?
No.
See the sledgehammer go through the window. Can you tell me who anybody is in this footage?
No.
Sure you're not in this footage?
Sure.
It's at the point where they take the car. Do you know who's taking it? Do you have any reason to be linked to this house?
No.
Would you be forensically linked to this house?
No.
Okay. Do you have any issues with your memory?
No.
No? Nothing like that? Do you have any issues with drink?
No.
Alcohol?
No.
Any issues with
No.
drugs? Recreational drugs or prescribed?
No problem, no.
Do you smoke, vape?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
What do you smoke?
Cigs and vapes.
Cigs and vapes,
Yeah,
do you?
yeah.
Right, okay. CSI attended afterwards and examined the house. The police had noticed a vape pen in the front room. This is the vape. Is that a vape of yours?
No.
Would this vape be linked to you?
No.
Okay. So that vape in that living room was forensically tested and your DNA was found on that vape. What can you tell me about that?
Police have arrested a man after his DNA was found on a vape that was left at the scene of a violent home invasion.
We're here in one of the interview rooms. So can you tell me anything about this?
No, I can't tell you anything.
Okay, why is that?
I don't know anything.
You don't know?
No.
Graham Green has so far denied any involvement.
Is that a vape of yours?
No.
Would this vape be linked to you?
No.
Okay.
But detectives are now putting their key evidence to him. Will he change his story?
That vape in that living room was forensically tested and your DNA was found on that vape. Okay, what can you tell me about that?
My DNA was found on that vape.
Yeah.
Can't tell you anything about that.
Why is that?
Don't know.
Can you tell me anything as to why your DNA is on a vape which has been found in a crime scene?
I haven't got an answer for that. Don't know.
How do you think that looks?
Looks really bad.
You're offering me no explanation as to how that's got there. So I put it to you that you was there and you've been involved in this incident. Is that true?
No.
No. Are you sure there's nothing you want to tell me now?
No.
I put it to you that your prior convictions paint you to be a dangerous, capable, convicted burglar. Now we found a vape with your DNA in the scene of a burglary. How does that look?
It looks bad, like.
Were you involved in that?
Yes.
You were?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
I was the one who went through the window.
Tell me everything about it then.
I can't tell you no more. I can't. That's all I did. I just went through the window and opened the door. Now waited downstairs.
Okay.
That's all I did.
Okay. Why did you do that?
I got no comment. That's all I want to say.
Right, how have you come to be involved with this, with them?
Temptation.
Temptation?
I mean,
What do you mean by that?
I don't know.
Is it financial temptation?
A little bit, you know.
A little bit, yeah. How did you get back home?
In that van.
In that van? Whose van was it?
Couldn't tell you.
I mean, ultimately, I appreciate the fact that you're saying all you did is go through the window with the sledgehammer and stay downstairs. You didn't do anything else. But ultimately, you have been involved in this. How was this organised?
I don't know.
Was it over phone?
Not by me.
Where did you get the sledgehammer from?
Someone one of them bought it.
One of them brought it?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
With Green admitting his role in the burglary, detectives now focus on the remaining suspects.
Who are they?
I can't say that.
Why?
I shouldn't have to take this all on myself.
You shouldn't. If your role in it has been limited to what you said, then
no, but I can't give up any of them. I can't. Because they're not. It's me.
It's not fair. If that's all your involvement you've had, then you shouldn't be taking all the blame for it.
We don't have to.
Essentially, these people have got you into a lot of trouble. It's a serious offence. I mean, you've heard what's happened. You've seen the pictures and stuff. You're not doing them any favours by not saying who it is.
I don't know how it goes, man, but I'm not doing myself any favours by telling you who we are either.
Is there anything you want to get off your chest whilst we're in an interview? You feel any remorse?
I've thought about it loads and loads of times, believe me. I think about it all the time.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was going to go down like that. I didn't know it was going to go down like that.
Or did you think it was going to go down?
Not like that.
Okay. In that case then, we'll close it up and we'll end the interview there.
Detectives have managed to obtain a confession from their suspect number 1. But Green has refused to give up the names of the other members of the gang.
It's quite common in suspect interviews that they very much won't dob their mates in. It could be for a number of reasons. They maybe just don't want to help the police. They don't want to see their friends in custody or in prison. But they could also be frightened of the other people that they've been working with, which is something we see quite often. Whilst they're all involved, there might be a principal offender who's that little bit worse, who, should their name come up, would make the other suspects' lives hell if they ever get hold of them again.
With time running down on Green's custody clock, PC Panther and DI Archer meet to review the case.
The motive for this is still a bit undecided, really.
Yeah.
And Green's given a bit of an account, but nothing particular.
No, nothing at all.
The suspect's mobile phone, has that been examined?
It has, yeah.
Anything on that?
Nothing that's anything in regards to the incident or anyone.
And obviously he's admitting being present anyway, so that's as far as that examination needs to go. As long as there's nothing on there that's going to identify the other suspects.
No, there's no conversations of anyone.
Then we're just left with the unknown DNA profile on the sledgehammer.
Yeah.
So with a bit of luck, that'll come back to someone in time as and when the new profiles land on their system.
Yeah.
So I think we're ready to take this to CPS.
With the weight of evidence against him, the Crown Prosecution Service agree to charge Green.
You got charged on the 4th of February 2024, having entered as a trespasser, burglaring keys and a mobile phone, and at the time of committing the said burglary, you had with you a weapon of offence, namely a sledgehammer and an axe. Do you have any reply to that charge?
I didn't have an axe, but go on, continue.
On the 4th of February, stole a motor vehicle. Do you have any reply to that charge?
I didn't steal a car.
CPS have sought to remand you at court tomorrow.
I'm over the moon. We've got to a position where we've been able to charge Mr. Green with aggravated burglary. There is still 4 outstanding suspects that we need to identify, so however happy I am, that happiness won't last. The pressure will be put back on my staff to identify the other 4 people. We have an outstanding DNA profile from the handle of the sledgehammer that was used in the offence. At some point, we will identify who that DNA profile belongs to. Now, whether that's this week, this month, this year, 5 years' time, that person will be identified. This was a horrific ordeal for our victims, and we will get justice in the end for them.
One family.
Oh my God.
Possible 45.
Two horrible tragedies. That's pretty dark stuff. At sea and on land.
My father, he is in bed and someone shot him in the head.
Do you remember what you noticed?
First thing I thought is this crime scene is staged.
Linda always felt that she deserved more than what she was getting, because she and my dad were always butting heads.
So we've got no weapons, we've got no enemies that we know of.
That we know of. And no more details, because she disappears.
I told her not to go on that boat.
So she went out of the way to give them information in case something happened.
Yes, indeed. It's just getting wilder and wilder.
Because in the middle of the ocean, nobody can hear you scream.
Every fisherman has a story about the one that got away. And this is Nathan Carmen's. The 22-year-old was set to meet up with his mom, Linda, for a late-night fishing trip out here off the coast of Rhode Island. But for Linda, the trip was less about catching bass and more about bonding with her son.
Fishing was one of the things that brought them together, and that was Linda really giving herself to the experience, because Linda hated fishing. Linda didn't eat fish, but she thought this was the only thing that made Nathan happy, and she wanted to connect with her son in any way possible.
That was a common occurrence. They used to go either weekly or sometimes bi-weekly.
Nathan and his mother, they'd taken a boating course. They had some fundamental knowledge, but they stuck pretty close to land and were fishing for stripers and blues.
Nathan's experience was, I would characterize him as a recreational fisherman.
Mom and son planned to cruise toward Block Island in this boat which Nathan recently bought, one that just passed inspection by the Coast Guard a month earlier. That's comforting to Linda, who has a better to be safe than sorry approach when it comes to boating.
So she begins to tell her friends about this fishing trip and shares information as to where they're going to be at specific times during that trip.
Linda is so cautious, she even texts photos of the boat and its registration number to her friends so it could be easily spotted if the boat breaks down.
You're relying on your engine, you're relying on electronics to get you there.
On a starless night with calm seas, the two depart Ram Point Marina in Rhode Island at about 11 p.m. Linda texts her friends that the journey is underway. The boat is never seen or heard from again.
One of my sisters had called me and said Linda and Nathan are missing. And I kind of freaked out.
Linda's friends begin to worry on Sunday of that weekend, because Linda had claimed that she was going to come back and text them when she arrived.
Linda always did a float log. And, you know, when Linda got back, she'd call her friend Sharon, and Sharon never received the phone call.
That's when two of her best friends reach out to authorities and say, something has happened. There are two missing boaters off the coast of Rhode Island. We need your help.
It started out as a typical missing persons investigation, which is not criminal in nature. Our first order of business is naturally to find the missing people, gather the facts and circumstances to try to determine how they potentially went missing. Oftentimes people are not missing, they're just overdue.
The U.S. Coast Guard quickly begins a search over the Atlantic.
The United States Coast Guard really deployed every available resource that they had to find this missing boat. They deployed fixed-wing aircraft, reconnaissance planes, Coast Guard cutters.
Given the nature of the success rate that the Coast Guard has with search and rescue, I was very, very shocked that they were not finding anything.
We defer to the Coast Guard for search and rescue efforts. In that respect, they were really scouring the ocean, and the search efforts came up unsuccessful.
I think it was day 6 that the Coast Guard made a decision to call off any additional search. And at that point, they had covered 64,000 square nautical miles, which is a massive, massive search area.
So the Orient Lucky, which is a Chinese cargo ship, they were out around 115 miles south of Martha's Vineyard as they were shifting ballast in their ship.
The Orient Lucky routinely travels the high seas picking up cargo, but this time it will make headlines for picking up something else. Lucky indeed.
They saw what they believed was an orange ball popping out of the ocean about 1 square nautical mile from where the cargo ship was positioned at the time. And when they got a little closer, they realized it was a life raft. And inside that life raft was a figure, a young man standing and waving a flag in distress. Getting this large freighter close enough to not kill Nathan Carman, but save Nathan Carman was a challenge. And I think the captain made a certain maneuver that allowed them to get a little closer to Nathan where they could deploy a life ring, and the life ring landed several feet away from where the life raft was. So Nathan then had to jump out of the life raft and swim.
The stunned crew members document the rescue with a series of photos and videos. Once he's on board, Nathan is offered hot soup, water, and dry clothes.
I got a call from my supervisor saying that Nathan had been recovered by a passing ship. I was shocked and I was thankful that there was a survivor.
The rescue, a kind of needle in a haystack, becomes international news.
And a man lost at sea with his mother for 8 days has been found alive in good condition.
There were pictures of Nathan that were on the front page of newspapers all over the world because everybody thought that this was a wild story.
Next tonight, here, the family mystery at sea. More than 100 miles from land, the discovery, and authorities asking what happened.
Nathan, this is United States Coast Guard, Boston. Over.
Mom and I, 2 people, myself and my mom, were fishing, and there was a funny noise in the engine compartment. I looked and saw a lot of water. The boat just dropped out from under my feet. When I saw the life raft, I did not see my mom. Have you found her?
No, we haven't been able to find her yet.
Nathan Carman is still on that freighter. He's expected to arrive in Boston tomorrow night.
So now we can start to maybe get some insight as to what transpired and why it transpired. But it was also concerning because Linda hadn't been recovered.
Happy to be back on land, but exhausted by his ordeal, Nathan heads home and asks for privacy.
I would just like to thank the public for their prayers and for their concern for both my mother and for myself.
It's not the first time this family has dealt with drama and tragedy.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
This is a nautical map. The area that Nathan departed from is right up here. His transit would have taken him down this body of water here. And that is the point in which one of the individuals traveling inbound observed Nathan and Linda on the boat. And that was the last time that anyone saw the boat.
In the days and weeks after his dramatic sea rescue, Nathan finds himself just as alone on land as he was at sea. And he feels like the media has gotten his story wrong. So he agrees to an interview with ABC News.
Well, it would be great to have people embracing you, saying, we're glad you're home, we're glad you're alive. It hasn't been that.
Loneliness seems to be Nathan's constant companion. He grew up an only child. His parents divorced when he was little. Kids made fun of him at school.
I heard people trying to imitate him or, try to make fun of the way he spoke. And I've definitely seen people mock the way he ran down the hallway.
I got the impression that a lot of people didn't try to talk to him, and maybe that kind of contributed to his loneliness or feeling isolated and uncomfortable being in crowds and with other people.
His best friend in the world was one who wouldn't judge him, a horse named Cruz.
Yes, I was very fortunate in that regard, and I was able to really form a strong bond emotionally.
Cruz and Nathan had a very tight bond. It was definitely his best friend, his confidant. I went to the stable once with Linda and Nathan. We were ready to leave the stable. I said, well, where's Nathan? Go on in and get Nathan. She's like, no, Nathan loves to spend time with Cruz alone before we leave. And he was there for probably a good half hour, if not longer, just spending time with Cruz in his stall.
But when Nathan is 17, that bond shatters. Cruz dies. Devastated, Nathan runs away from his Connecticut home. Nathan doesn't stop running until he reaches Virginia, 600 miles away. That's where a sheriff's deputy finds him.
Running away from home was something that I felt that I had to do at the time. I don't fully understand or comprehend that sitting here now.
A couple of interesting things Nathan had on him on his possession when he was found in Virginia. He had $4,000 in cash. That money had been given to him by his grandfather, but he also had a couple of photos of his horse, Cruz. And he had a Ziploc bag with some of the horse's hair in it.
His parents drive all night to Virginia to bring Nathan home.
Clark Carmen told me that Nathan had fled to a horse farm, or that's where he was supposed to be going, in Florida, because Nathan had told his father that that was a place that he could feel normal.
Nathan is diagnosed with Asperger's, which we now know as autism spectrum disorder. Social interactions and communication skills can be challenging.
I'm not someone who understands relationships or who's good about talking about emotions.
But Nathan does share a close relationship with his grandfather, John Chocolos, a wealthy real estate developer who made his fortune in the nursing home business.
My dad had 5 sisters and 4 daughters, and then he had his first grandchild. I think Linda was really excited that she had a boy to bring into my dad's life.
And then Nathan comes along, and he's your uncle's first grandchild. He doted on him.
Right.
How excited was he to have a grandson?
I mean, there's not really even words for it. He had such great hopes for that kid.
Tell me about the daughters in the family.
I think they were all different individuals. Elaine was the oldest. The next one down was Linda. She was more like John, personality-wise. Charlene is the next one down. Valerie's the youngest. I think she was kind of like the apple of John's eye.
My grandfather was the closest person to me. He was like a father to me, and I know I was like a son to him.
When it comes to business, Nathan, a teenager, has a pretty unusual role at his grandfather's company, one that requires him to look and listen closely.
John Chocolus brought Nathan to all of his business dealings because John Chocolus was hard of hearing, and Nathan was his both eyes and ears at every business meeting. They would consult each other after the business meetings were completed. So I think that, John Chocolus was grooming Nathan to take over the family business.
I got the feeling that John had a very good relationship with him and was trying to cultivate that. Nathan was as introverted as John was extroverted, I think.
What was his relationship like as Nathan is growing up? You said there weren't enough words.
He kind of treated him the same way that he treated me when I was a kid. He couldn't do enough for him. The only problem with it is that John always looked at a problem. If there's a problem, if you throw enough money at it, it's going to solve it.
John Chocolus doted on Nathan, gave him anything he wanted, whether it was a credit card or a new truck or a new apartment. There was nothing that Nathan needed because John was always there with his checkbook or his credit card to give Nathan anything he wanted.
With a support system like his granddad, Nathan's future could be limitless until one phone call changes everything.
Oh my God! Oh my God! The front door was locked. Oh my God!
Possible 45.
Oh my God! I don't even know what to do. I don't even know where to look.
Windsor, Connecticut, a typical small town. Pretty nice community. Not a lot of crime. Murders in Windsor are very rare.
Not rare enough for the man living on Overlook Drive. John Chocolus was a self-made man here in Windsor, Connecticut, running his multi-million-dollar real estate business out of his modest home. That is until the morning of December 20th, 2013. Police arrive here after getting an urgent 911 call.
Okay, what's the emergency?
I came to check on my father to pick him up for an activity. He is in bed and someone shot him in the head.
Is he still alive?
I don't think so. I walked into the bedroom and there's blood all over the back wall.
When I saw the news and my dad being brought out, in a body bag, and them saying it was a murder, and I lost it. I lost it. I fell to the floor and I'm crying hysterically.
My name is Scott McGregor. In 2013, I was a detective for the Windsor Police Department. Mr. Chocolus was found in a bedroom on the upper part of the house. In his bed, we found him that he had been shot 3 times.
The scene says a lot to the detective, not for what's in the house, but for what isn't.
You obviously start looking for evidence, and when you can't find spent shell casings, once again, you go back to whoever did this, took the time to retrieve those casings and not leave evidence behind. That kind of tells us that the person planned this out, knew to cover their steps, which ultimately makes our investigation harder.
Sergeant Chris McKee also gets the call to head to Overlook Drive, a quiet street with a quiet resident who wasn't exactly well known around town. How did he fit into the community in terms of how he had accumulated his wealth? Was he kind of like a little local success story?
I gotta say, he ran in his circles and his business circles. He wasn't known in Windsor, and I was very active in community roles in the department, and like I said, I wasn't aware of him until this investigation.
McKee walks into a bloody scene. You're looking around the room. Do you remember what you noticed?
A little further down from Mr. Chocolus' bedroom, there was a glass door, or a door with glass panes that led into the backyard. The officer and I observed that there was broken glass.
A break-in?
Well, It looked like it was meant to be a break-in, but looking at it, it was very clear that the glass had been punched from the wrong side, and it was very suspicious. First thing I thought is this crime scene is staged.
The recently widowed victim was known to keep cash in his house, but after the shots were fired, the gunman left. The money still there. Was there any sense that it had been ransacked or robbed?
There had been large sums of money in the house and other valuables, and honestly, nothing appeared touched. It told me that this was personal.
The devastated family speaks out on local news, hoping to catch a killer.
My father, while he lived a small life, he was a very large man. And to know him, you could never forget him.
Anyone could have done this.
This person killed at least once that we know of. This person's gotten away with murder, and chances are it will happen again.
When we start any murder investigation, we want to do a timeline. We want to start trying to find out who was with John.
My father, my mother passed November 21st. My father, for 2 weeks, was staying with one of us, or Linda was staying at my father's house.
Another curious thing about the home, it doesn't exactly look like a millionaire lives there. One of the victim's daughters explains why.
My father has an elaborate estate. I mean, the man's worth at least $40 to $50 million. I mean, it's huge. You wouldn't know it going into the house. That's the only reason why I'm bringing up my father's financial worth. Is because looking at this house, you would not know that he has a 25,000 square foot house up in New Hampshire.
You find out that this is a prominent businessman, a wealthy businessman.
Yep.
What does that say to you initially about this?
Kind of starts to focus investigators in on, was this financially motivated? Did someone have, this gentleman had a lot of money, a lot of properties, did someone have something to gain financially from his death?
The videos of the Windsor police interviewing various family members have never been broadcast before.
Nathan and I went fishing. We went out of Point Judith, Rhode Island.
Okay.
So we went on a cod trip that left at 6 in the morning, got back into port at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
A long day.
We learned that John, the day before, the last person to see him was his grandson, Nathan Carmen. We learned that through talking to Nathan, talking to family.
Hey Nathan, what's your last name? My last name is spelled C-A-R-M-A-N.
We have to treat everyone as a possible suspect. Family, associates, people who worked in the office, neighbors, anything. Anyone could have done this.
Investigators asked Nathan about employees at Chocolos's company, and the grandson mentions one who, he says, complains about being overworked and underpaid.
Just that I'm underpaid, also the stress load. I have 101 things to do. I have to get all these papers in. Now you're asking me to do this and the other thing. So he would bitch and moan about that.
The bookkeeper is, in fact, stealing from the Chocolos's company.
So obviously he's someone we want to talk to.
Nathan begins outlining his final evening with his grandfather to investigators. It begins with dinner. He was going to come here and eat that night with Nathan.
That was the plan, and he wanted me to come too. Yeah. And, I said, look, you guys go do it. If I only knew what I knew, now.
After their meal, Nathan and his grandfather return to the Windsor home. At some point, John Chocolos gets a phone call and puts it on speaker.
I think that there's a real possibility that the person who called him may have been a mistress. I don't like saying that my grandfather was doing that, but I think there's that real possibility.
It wasn't one of your aunts?
No, it was not one of my aunts. It was not one of my aunts, no one in the family. Very young, 20, 30. And he then told that female voice to just wait. Hold on a second. He showed me to the door.
Nathan Carmen is correct. There is a young woman Chocolos has been talking to.
And she became a suspect. Did you go anywhere else that night or anything like that? Or did you just stay home?
No, I didn't sleep because I was where I had to be at. I was supposed to be at the meet my mom at 3 o'clock. When I fall asleep, I have difficulty waking up, so I tried to stay awake. I did run out to Stop and Shop, and I got some ice cream for myself. I picked up a few AAA batteries because I was out of them, and then I headed home. Then I stayed until I went back out to meet my mom.
Investigators don't have much to go on, with the exception of some security camera footage, which they used to retrace the last days of John Chocolos's life. Like this casino video, where the 87-year-old is seen with a much younger woman. Will it provide investigators with answers? The Windsor Police Department may not know who killed John Chocolos yet, but they are beginning to understand who did not. Remember the woman Nathan heard on the phone? And the woman at the casino? They are one and the same.
So John Chocolos struck up a relationship with a 25-year-old woman over the course of a year.
She was an acquaintance of John who was going to the casino, staying overnight. The night of the homicide, she confirmed that she had talked to John, but she was kind of quickly dismissed as being involved.
Investigators have also tracked down that bookkeeper Nathan mentioned. His name is William Sati, and he too is cleared.
He had an alibi that night and was confirmed. I think he was actually out of the state at the time. I think we found him in Rhode Island.
While cleared as a suspect in the murder, Sati was later convicted of stealing some $400,000 from Chocolos's company.
But that's small change compared to the money the patriarch was handing over to family members every year.
One of the problem children was Linda. Linda was taking John's allowances and going off on spending sprees at casinos or going skiing or taking these lavish trips around the world.
Linda always felt that she deserved more than what she was getting. I don't know why she felt that way. I don't know, because she and my dad were always butting heads.
Father and daughter also butt heads over the way Nathan is being raised.
The relationship between John and Linda was always volatile. But one day, it turned violent. And that was over Nathan's care. Nathan was put into a psychiatric hospital shortly after his horse, Cruz, had died. And the accusations begin to fly. Linda accuses John of smothering her son with all sorts of riches, and John is yelling at Linda, saying that she is a bad mother and that Nathan is normal, and that Nathan should be treated as such. And at one point, John reaches across the table and grabs Linda by the hair and starts to pull it. So Linda swings, and she starts to fight back at her father. And it's a combustible moment that probably lasted a minute plus, and they're swinging at each other, they're fighting each other, and the orderlies are summoned as well as the local police, and Linda is arrested right on the spot.
Linda chalks it up as two people cut from the same cloth.
I don't back down from my father. Yeah.
And that's just his personality not to back down.
Yeah,
Sure.
and it's not his personality back down either. So if anyone would have fought with him, you know, it would have been me.
Linda has spent many more years fighting to protect her son from those who might treat him unkindly.
I know he led a very lonely life. It's at the age where kids were being invited to birthday parties and, having play dates. And nobody was calling for Nathan to go to the birthday party. And, it was sad. And she hated that for her child. Any mother would hate it if her child wasn't included in anything. But yeah, it must have been hard for Linda not being able to fix that. Linda was a fixer. Linda had to fix things. Or at least try to fix things, and she just could not fix that.
Linda and Nathan had a very unique and conflicted relationship. Nathan saw his mother as somebody who was incredibly domineering, and Linda was always trying to get him the therapy that she thought he needed. And I think Nathan wanted to get as far away from his mother as possible because Nathan didn't want to feel different from anybody else.
And with his grandfather, Nathan feels like a success. He learns about business. He's a confidant to John Chocolos. His college tuition is paid for, and so is the rent on his apartment and his credit card bills. Linda couldn't compete with that.
I think what it comes down to is Nathan's always felt torn between me and my father.
Picking sides.
Like he had to pick a side.
How's your relationship in general to your mother?
I did move out of her house, and when we were not on good terms, but I since started speaking to her again. Probably about a year ago.
Did that concern you at all in terms of looking at him as a suspect, that maybe he might exhibit behavior that you wouldn't normally see, but he does have a disorder?
That was a concern of many of us, are the behaviors we're seeing, are the answers he's giving in that one interview that he did grant, are these more aligned with behaviors perhaps of someone who is on the autism spectrum? Or can we look at these for what we normally would kind of think, this is kind of sketchy, a little suspicious, we want to delve more into this.
Was your grandpa involved during that time?
Yes, my grandpa, he facilitated financially my ability to go off on her.
So for Linda, the recent fishing trips are a way of pulling her son back into her life. But now there's the murder of her father to deal with and lots of money at stake. Everybody is under the microscope.
Do you own any weapons?
No.
Anybody else in the family own any weapons?
No.
Anybody have access to any weapons? Anybody that knows anybody that has weapons? Nothing at all. Okay. So we've got no weapons, we've got no enemies we know of.
That we know of.
Do you own any firearms?
I do have an air gun. Okay. I'm not sure if that counts as a firearm, but...
Is it the only?
Yes, it is.
But after speaking with a long line of friends, family, and business associates, investigators are about to realize they've been lied to. In the wake of 87-year-old John Chocolos' brutal murder, investigators have few leads, with one notable exception: fragments of the bullets fired at the victim. There's hope that they could be traced back to a possible murder weapon. What kind of weapon was used to kill him?
It was believed to be a rifle because it was a .308 cartridge, a certain type of bullet.
And a ballistics test concludes the gun used was most likely a Sig Sauer rifle, like this one.
But in the wake of the Newtown massacre, these types of weapons were illegal to own in Connecticut, where Chocolos was murdered.
The detectives focused a lot of their attention on New Hampshire. They scoured gun dealers, I think well over 600 gun dealers, looking for that Sig Sauer rifle.
Eventually, investigators make their way to a place called Shooter's Outpost and speak with salesman Jed Warner about recent purchases. He remembers an interaction with a customer just weeks earlier.
He definitely stood out because he looked like he came off like a construction site. His pants were dirty. He was wearing like a pair of dirty boots, like a construction feel about him. We started talking about rifles and targeting. He said, actually, I'm very interested in the Sig Sauer 716.
It's an expensive rifle, retailing for almost $2,000. Jed says he suggested other options that were more economical for target shooting, but the buyer knows what he wants.
We do all the paperwork, do the background, he passes. He just kind of walked straight out, and that was the last we saw of him. 2 officers from the Windsor area were there, and then a local, like a Connecticut ATF agent. We had to go through all the stuff, try to figure out the day of sale.
And there they find it, a bill of sale for a Sig Sauer rifle. The name of the purchaser, Nathan Carmen.
And that became an incredible aha moment for investigators. and potentially the smoking gun in this case.
After the discovery at Shooter's Outpost, Nathan is asked again about owning any guns.
And since, because I just wasn't feeling safe at home, I did buy a shotgun.
You did buy a shotgun?
That's correct.
Any other purchases of a firearm anytime?
No.
And that wasn't ever volunteered or brought up till investigators found this out-of-state bill of sale and then confronted Nathan with it.
And how did he respond?
Well, he acknowledged that he had bought this weapon. When asked about it, he said he lost it. And he didn't know where the gun was.
That had to be really a red flag for you all.
It was.
Most people don't lose those firearms or any firearm. But yeah, you don't normally hear, I don't know where it is.
And there was no report of him, making a report that it was stolen, lost, etc.
So what are you thinking at this point? You've been kind of connecting these dots.
Well, it gets better. There was at least 1 hour of unaccounted time during which Mr. Chocolos was shot that Nathan couldn't account for his time.
Linda arrives at this Home Depot parking lot at 3 a.m., where she and Nathan are set to meet up to go fishing. But Nathan is nowhere to be found.
You left your house on about 3, and we know you got to Glassberry based on your own words on or about 4. Why would it take an hour to travel, and I'm guessing 20-something miles at the rate of 65 miles an hour? It's just mathematically not possible.
On or around 3, not on or about 3. So perhaps after.
But this security footage taken outside Nathan's apartment complex shows him leaving at 2:57 a.m. Linda tries calling her son 3 times, but his phone appears to be turned off. He finally calls her back at 4:01 a.m. Did you think you were closing in on an arrest?
I thought so. Yes.
I have to ask you straight up, were you involved in your grandfather's death? Did you kill him?
Absolutely not. No.
But that potential smoking gun, the Sig Sauer rifle, is still missing. Despite a months-long extensive search of Nathan's apartment, the Chocolos estate, and surrounding areas for that crucial piece of evidence, it's nowhere to be found.
And I think that's exactly what they were pinning their entire case on, was that murder weapon. Had they found it and connected it to Nathan, then Nathan would have been in handcuffs.
And so law enforcement was directed to keep working to try to build the case.
This had to be frustrating.
It just tears at you because you think you've got it. The family had put up a huge billboard on Interstate 91, and coming and going to work every day, I would see that. I would see Mr. Chocolos's face. I would see, reward money for information.
Even though Nathan is under a cloud of suspicion, he's still a free man, but feels like he's an outcast in his own community now. So he takes a portion of his inheritance that had been given to him by his grandfather, and he leaves the state. He travels to Vermont, and he buys an historic farmhouse, and he also bought a boat.
Nathan buys a 31-foot fishing boat, formerly called the Chicken Pox. He plans another fishing outing with his mom, Linda, who has stood by him throughout all the accusations.
And Linda is very excited about that opportunity, but also very concerned because she knows that her son is not an experienced fisherman or an experienced boater.
Linda tells friends that the plan was to fish off the coast of Block Island and head back the next morning.
She was so concerned that she had a text message conversation with people ashore, and that's a smart thing to do, to let people know what your plans are.
So she went out of the way to give them information in case something happened.
Yes, indeed.
When Linda fails to check in, her friends start to worry.
2 of her best friends reach out to authorities and say, something has happened, we need your help.
At first, we were like, okay, hopefully it's just they're overdue and they're gonna come back to shore.
But after several days elapse, authorities search Nathan's home and vehicle and find some alarming items.
We start thinking that he may have intent to either harm himself and his mother or both of them.
How did you get word that something had gone wrong with that?
My cousin Charlene called me and told me that they were missing. And I said, I told her not to go on that boat.
Here is Nathan in a 31-foot aluminum boat with his mother, who's got no experience boating, and he thinks that he's the master fisherman or the master boater. Or does he think this is the perfect place to kill his mother? Because in the middle of the ocean, nobody can hear you scream.
But what really happened on that boat? Nathan Carmen answers tough questions under oath.
How often did you lie to the Windsor Police Department?
There was one inaccurate.
Staring out at that open water, probably wondering what happened to my mother, or thinking, did I just get away with murder?
His mother is still missing and feared dead.
And the question becomes, what happened? Everybody wants to know what happened.
I didn't know if she had been dragged down with the ship. Neither of us had been wearing life vests.
The media coverage was huge.
I'm just asking you to defend yourself against these people who are saying that you did something to your boat that would make it sink.
Yeah, we're done for this evening, period.
He was shooting himself in the foot on national TV.
It is absolutely unfair for the police to use the tragedy that happened to my mother and I as an opportunity to try to nail me for a murder that I didn't commit.
Nathan's grandfather, John Chocolass, had been shot to death 3 years prior to the disappearance of Linda Carmen. And once those connections were made, the story amplified.
You were convinced that Nathan had killed his grandfather.
Correct.
And now you're convinced that he killed his own mother?
It's a story about greed and heartless brutality.
Mr. Chocolass was found in a bedroom on the upper part of the house, in his bed, shot several times in the head. We have to treat everyone as a possible suspect. Anyone could have done this.
But my sisters had told me they suspected Nathan. And that just totally blew me out of the water.
The daughters of John Chocolass got very angry that there was really nothing happening with the case. They couldn't find the murder weapon. They hadn't arrested Nathan Carmen.
And it's just getting wilder and wilder.
Could a family be this burdened to have a second catastrophic event? I didn't know. This is slowly starting to move from a missing persons case to something other than a missing persons case.
It's been 3 years since John Chocolass's murder, with no charges ever filed. Now, the family is facing yet another tragedy as Chocolass's grandson, Nathan Carmen's boat sinks on a fishing trip, with Nathan's mom, Linda, missing and presumed drowned. We're going to head out on a ride on the open water to get a better idea of what happened out here. I met up with Dave Farrell, a maritime lawyer for Nathan's boat insurers. So let's pick up with when the Coast Guard gets involved in this.
They had a lot of vessels out here. They had a lot of aerial searches, and they were really crisscrossing an area that eventually was 64,000 square miles.
That's a big coverage area.
Yeah, the state of Georgia.
And then 2 days later, there's a big shock.
The Orient Lucky finds a life raft 106 miles south of Martha's Vineyard, and in it is Nathan Carmen alone.
With his crew already snapping pictures and recording video, the ship's captain is alerted to a life raft in the water.
After spotting Nathan Carmen and his life raft at sea, I sounded the alarm for our crew to prepare for the rescue efforts, and we were ready to rescue him.
They threw him a life ring, and he grabbed it with his hands. He got dragged up toward the hull of the ship. He was able to push off the side of the ship with his outstretched hand and he was able to climb up the gangway.
He got onto the ladder. We pulled the ladder up on board.
When Nathan gets aboard the Orient Lucky, the kid looked like Aquaman. There was no physical distress in his well-being. He wasn't dehydrated. He was not hypothermic.
The captain of the Orient Lucky doesn't see anything wrong with him. This is astounding.
I got the call from my supervisor that he'd been located and recovered. I was shocked, and I was thankful. I was happy that there was a survivor, but it was also concerning because Linda hadn't been recovered.
When I found out that, Linda was lost at sea and, I knew she wasn't coming back, it was just, I just had flashbacks of us growing up and just, the good times that we did have. And then, of course, the guilt and the regret that I had of how I treated her in the end. You just don't think that you're going to lose somebody so suddenly like that.
We receive a call from the Coast Guard that Nathan was picked up by a merchant vessel in the shipping lanes in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. First thing you say is, okay, where's Linda? Linda's not with him, just Nathan.
Back on land, with his lawyer present, Nathan's interviewed by Alfred Bucco, an investigator with the South Kingston, Rhode Island Police Department. This audio's never been broadcast before.
I just went in there and said, Nathan, tell me what happened.
We went out to Block Canyon. It was light, but the sun wasn't over the horizon yet. And we started trolling. Okay. And I heard strange noise coming from the engine compartment. So I opened up the hatch in front of the pilot house, and I saw that there was a lot of water in the bilge.
He went and shut down the engine and moved aft to where his mother was.
He said he told his mom to reel in the lines. How did he describe what was happening with the commotion?
He said to his mother only one thing during this calamity, and it was reel in the lines. And she said only one thing in return, okay, I will. At that point, he went up into the wheelhouse, and he says that he started moving emergency gear up to the bow. He wasn't quite ready to abandon ship, but he wanted to be ready.
I didn't realize we were sinking.
Okay.
I knew there was water in the bilge. I knew there was a lot of water because it was already up to that level. Just why I wanted to bring the safety stuff as a precaution.
Okay.
But I thought I was going to find the problem and fix it.
The third time that he's been in the wheelhouse and failed to radio, he's walking forward to the bow, and all of a sudden, in a split second, the boat sinks.
Boats don't sink that fast.
No. And it sank quickly, like immediately it was out of sight. And that's how he says he never saw his mother again.
He calls for his mother throughout the rest of the day. And he said upon nightfall, he gave up trying to search for her, and he went to sleep and then drifted through the Atlantic Ocean until he was located. So let's get back to your mother. You talk to her, all the time. You go out fishing twice a week. How would you describe, your relationship with her? Is it good?
I don't see the relevance to this particular incident here.
Yeah, I concur.
I think this interview's over. Thank you, though.
After the interview was over, from our perspective, we're like, okay, this isn't just a missing persons investigation. We may be dealing with maybe a homicide.
Captain Hengdong observed Nathan walking the deck of the Orient Lucky for hours at a time by himself, staring out at that open water, probably wondering what happened to my mother, or thinking, did I just get away with murder?
And soon, the whole world will hear from Nathan Carman in his own words.
She had always been kind of reluctant about safety. I guess she had good reason to be.
New developments in that mystery at sea. Rescued after 8 days in a life raft, searchers had given up.
Nathan Carmen and his mother went fishing last week. He survived the ordeal, but his mother didn't make it.
Now authorities are trying to figure out what happened.
The media coverage was huge. This was a story that made headlines around the country.
Initially, Nathan avoids the media, but eventually agrees to an interview with then ABC News correspondent Lindsay Janis in 2017. At his suggestion, they meet at a park near his home.
So take me through that evening. You met at the marina in Rhode Island, and then what?
We met at the marina in Rhode Island, and we had bait, which we got on board. And as we were heading out into the harbor, I had asked her a couple times in the past, will you go to the canyons with me? And she had always been kind of reluctant about safety, and I guess she had good reason to be.
While Nathan and Linda were still missing and the Coast Guard scouring the Atlantic, investigators back on land began searching through their vehicles here at this marina, looking for clues that might help in the search.
It looked like he had been somewhat almost living out of his truck or sleeping in his truck. We found some receipts from different marine stores.
Items purchased at area marinas in the hours before the fateful voyage included a rock-type anchor that would never have worked for Nathan's boat, and then some lengths of chain. They were curious purchases.
But there was also a bucket of eels that was in Nathan's truck. That stood out to me because eels are often used as bait when fishing for striped bass. And if you left the dock and didn't take your bait, what are you using for bait if you're going fishing?
Nathan tells us the same story he told police, that his mom had been concerned about safety ahead of the boat trip.
And I want to stress that it wasn't an argument, because I want to stress that it was not an argument. She had always been kind of skittish. We're stopping right here with that question.
Oh, okay.
But why not reach out for help? The Coast Guard said there was no Mayday call.
I had a radio, and there was also an EPIRB, which is an emergency position indicating radio beacon, on the boat, like someone needs to be medevaced, or when you know you're sinking. But I didn't know that we were sinking until we sank.
Nathan said that there was a lot of commotion going on and the water was being taken on in here. So where would his mom have been when all of this is happening?
Right where you are.
So she would have been right back in this area?
Yes.
But they're not speaking? I mean, and she doesn't know that they're going down?
Nathan has excellent line of sight on her the whole time, and yet he says he never saw her afterwards.
At that point, I didn't know if she had been dragged down with the ship, because neither of us had been wearing life vests. I assumed that if she had been on the surface, that she would have been calling out to me and I would have been able to find her.
According to Nathan, days go by and he huddles on the life raft, keeping a lookout for rescuers.
I was looking out at the horizon for other ships or for helicopters when conditions were good. When the waves were high, because they got to like 13 feet and they were breaking waves at a few points, a few days.
It must have been terrifying.
Yes.
But to some, Nathan's claim of drifting for over a week in rough seas before being rescued defies belief.
The initial videos showing this guy walking up the gangway of the ship without any great problem. He seemed to be just fine.
You would be in dire straits after, 5 or 6 days.
If you laid on that couch for 8 days and you got up to go to the bathroom, your legs would be wobbly because you haven't used them.
At the same time that Nathan and Linda's vehicles were searched at the docks, police in Vermont were conducting a search of Nathan's house, which was under construction.
The investigators find, modems, SIM cards, a few other things. The one thing they don't find is a computer. Whatever computer he was using to conduct his online purchases has disappeared.
Another item that was seized during the search was a lengthy letter that Nathan had written to an unknown priest that described his relationship and his view of his mother.
My mother's bullying, calling me a quitter, a stuck-up snob who thinks he is a king, and a piece of basically characterized my childhood. One night, though, I went to bed imagining myself as essentially a master of my own hell, joying in inflicting grave bodily suffering on other people. So, yeah.
After his interview with Alfred Bucco, Nathan has all but stopped talking to the police and is never questioned about the letter or his missing computer. Reporter Lindsay Janis is one of the few people he is willing to talk to.
I know I wasn't responsible for anything that resulted from the boat sinking. I know I wasn't responsible for my mom's death.
You were convinced that Nathan had killed his grandfather.
Correct.
And now you're convinced that he killed his own mother?
Yes.
That's pretty dark stuff. If the interview hadn't already made Nathan's story seem a little fishy, the follow-up was even more eye-opening.
I did not cause my mother's death. We're done here this evening.
If you have nothing to hide, there shouldn't be a problem answering the questions.
Oh, Dave.
Oh, hi, Dave. Nice to meet you. Hi, how are you?
I'm Matt. Nice
hi,
to meet you.
Matt, nice to meet you, Matt. Thanks so much for taking us out. Initially, when everybody else was scratching their heads and wondering, wow, this poor guy, what happened to his mom? For the average person out there who's looking at this and taking it at face value, folks who know the water, like you do, had your doubts.
Absolutely. People had doubts about this story from the beginning.
With Linda Carmen presumed lost at sea, her reportedly tumultuous relationship with her son Nathan was under renewed scrutiny. He sits down with 2020 for a second interview, which now holds new significance.
If someone said that you did not get along with your mother, that you did not like her, is there any truth to that at all?
No, there's not any truth to that. Our relationship had grown from where it had been. We did have a challenging relationship at one point in my life, but she was the closest person in the world to me after my grandfather passed.
Will you inherit all of what your mother had?
That's something that I can't comment on at this time.
But unbeknownst to Nathan, his mom has decided not to leave him any inheritance. She even records a video message obtained exclusively by 2020 explaining that he won't be getting her house.
Hey, big guy, I guess if you're watching this, you're watching this. I want to explain why I did what I did and why my will is stated the way it is. I feel that when you moved out, you took everything that was of value to you and everything you wanted. That's my feeling.
And in her written last will and testament, dated 3 years before she disappeared, Linda explicitly excludes Nathan as a beneficiary.
By now, more details of John Chocolos's death and the subsequent investigation have risen to the surface.
Initially, the media was unaware that Nathan's grandfather, John Chocolos, had been shot to death in his bed 3 years prior to the disappearance of Linda Carmen. And once those connections were made, the story amplified. It wasn't a bittersweet rescue story anymore. It was something potentially much more devious.
So, at what point in your life would you say that you became really close with your grandfather?
Here's where I have a bit of an issue. My understanding was we were going to be sitting down and we were going to be talking about
yeah, the raft is my next bit, but we did explain that we need to hear about your whole life leading up to this incident. How can people know who Nathan is if we don't tell them? What was your relationship like with your grandfather?
I'm not talking about my relationship with my grandfather or with if you want to ask me any more questions on that line, we're done here.
Can you tell me more about what your grandfather did? He was a big figure in this part of the country.
That's not what this interview is about.
He gets really defensive if people pry a little bit too much. And the way that he shut her off on so many questions and wouldn't cooperate, he was shooting himself in the foot on national TV.
Since we spoke a week ago, there's been a lot of speculation. People are suspicious of you. What do you want to say to those people who are saying something about his story that just isn't adding up?
I'm not aware that those people exist.
There are suspicions about the boat trip. Since we last got together a week ago,
I've said the way it happened.
I'm just asking you to defend yourself against these people who are saying that you did something to your boat that would make it sink.
That's not true.
Nathan had never been interviewed at length by a network or by a reporter, so this was something new to Nathan, and I think Nathan thought it was going to go one way when it certainly went another way.
Was there an issue with the boat that needed to be fixed?
No, there were. We're done.
Nathan, I'm trying to give you an opportunity to speak out against these allegations that have been made.
The only way that I can speak out against them is to say what actually happened, and that's what I've been trying to do.
Another thing that's happened since we last got together, police searched your mom's home.
Yeah,
did you know anything about that?
We're done for this evening, period. We're done here.
We're not trying to make you uncomfortable. We're trying to give you an opportunity to answer some of these allegations.
We're done here this evening.
If you have nothing to hide, there shouldn't be a problem answering the questions.
He walked out. He walked out of the interview, only to come back.
Police never arrested you for the murder of your grandfather. Do you think it is unfair that people are bringing that up and talking about that now?
It is absolutely unfair for the police to use the tragedy that happened to my mother and I as an opportunity to try to nail me for a murder that I didn't commit.
Can you understand when people see that you were the last person to see two people alive? They see that and they say you are either the most unlucky man alive or you had something to do with those two deaths. What do you say to that?
I say that there's no relationship.
Later that month, Nathan holds a memorial service for his mom. It's sparsely attended by some of her friends. Linda's sisters are notably absent.
Now, Linda hasn't even been declared dead yet. Nobody in his family is willing to go because many of us in his family believe that Nathan is truly the culprit.
I'm very grateful to the friends and family who attended in memory of my mom.
Nathan, you've been through so much. How have you been these last several weeks?
It's been very difficult.
We had no boat. We had no body. But as in any investigation, there's always evidence that can be recovered. It's just a matter of making sure that you know where to look.
There's all hands on deck at that point to try to uncover the truth.
As with the death of John Chocolos, according to investigators, there isn't enough evidence to charge Nathan with a crime. But in a twist of fate, a seemingly innocuous insurance claim for the sunken boat is about to take the saga of Nathan Carman in an unexpected direction.
Some of these strange occurrences maybe could be chalked up to an inexperienced fisherman, a guy who's panicking.
You know, I spent a lot of time with Nathan. I think he was cold, calculating, and had this whole story planned out to explain the disappearance of his mother and the sinking of the vessel.
The idea that he drifted for a week in that life raft just didn't hold water for you?
Not even for a second.
The Nathan Carman case was incredibly explosive. A young man is plucked out of the ocean. That just conjures up all of these images of, say, Tom Hanks in Castaway.
Author Casey Sherman has spent the last 2.5 years researching the case for his new book, Blood in the Water.
The story is so complex and it has so many layers to it. Not only do you have one potential murder, but it's the story about a family and how wealth can corrupt.
As investigators continue digging into Nathan Carmen's story of being lost at sea, he takes action, filing an insurance claim for $85,000 to recoup the loss of his boat, the chickenpox.
It happened very promptly, and that indicated to me that this guy's really serious.
The insurance company is not going to pay Nathan. In fact, they are going to take Nathan to court. Nathan also didn't back down.
We filed our suit to deny insurance coverage. We were in for a fight. We came away with the distinct impression that almost everything he said to us was a lie. There were holes in every aspect of his story.
Holes in his story and his boat. Here at this marina where Nathan's odyssey began, fellow boaters noticed odd behavior in him the day before that fateful trip.
It kind of caught my eye when I saw him leaning over the back and drilling 2 holes in the transom of the boat. I asked him, "What are you doing?" That's why he told me, he says, he's taking the trim tabs off.
Trim tabs are stabilization devices that help lift the boat up higher on the water. Nathan admits to removing them, leaving holes in his boat, but says he patched them up with a marine putty.
I patched the holes. They seemed to be well patched. And at the time my mom and I went out, I felt that one, I knew those holes were above the water line, and 2, I felt that they were securely patched.
The idea that he was patching up those holes, that putty, the patching didn't work?
It wouldn't work. My theory is that he was trying to make it look like he was deliberately altering the boat in a dangerous fashion.
So that maybe it looked like he made a mistake.
He's very calculating. He wanted people to be able to point to, oh, no wonder the boat sank.
Attorney Dave Farrell represented Nathan's boat insurance companies and has looked into Nathan's account of what happened for years. Nathan's story is that his boat started taking on water, but he failed to put out a distress call because he didn't think the boat was sinking. One would think then maybe he would call out for help, the Mayday situation, right? Did he do that?
No, and he had ample opportunity, because each of the times that he went into the wheelhouse to carry gear forward, he was within arm's length of the microphone for his VHF radio, and a good one.
This is where the emergency equipment is, right? Here?
Yeah, right here. A microphone within arm's reach. And he came in here 3 times to get survival gear and bring it up to the bow. So he was within arm's length 3 times he could have picked it up.
All of these things sound pretty odd. Maybe you can chalk them up to panic, an inexperienced fisherman, but you would have to have hard evidence to really show that he wasn't where he should have been.
I got an oceanographer to assess whether it was possible for him to drift in a life raft to where the Orient Lucky picked him up 7 days later.
And was it?
Absolutely impossible. Physically impossible.
I looked at drifting buoys, I looked at historical data, I looked at thermal images of the Gulf Stream rings. All of these different systems showed the currents going westward, and Nathan claimed he drifted eastward. And that did not make any sense.
And Nathan's aunts aren't buying his alleged fish tales either.
New twist in a story making national headlines involving Nathan Carmen.
They file what is known as a Slayer petition, which prevents a person from inheriting property from someone they murdered.
Nathan Carmen's aunts do not want him to inherit that money, and they say essentially profit off of 2 deaths they believe he caused.
When Nathan walks into court, he's actually got a suit, and he's cleaned up, he's shaven.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Nathan Carmen appearing on my own behalf.
He looks like a young, aspiring law student.
The loss of my mom has been extremely difficult for me, so I can sympathize with petitioners in that respect.
He ended up taking depositions. He ended up going into court and arguing motions.
I'll say that
Some of the petitioners had awfully substantial bone, and I had very, very little.
He ended up putting up his own defense.
You saw him sort of tell the truth the whole time. But in this deposition obtained by 2020, it's Nathan in the hot seat.
This is the deposition of Nathan Carmen.
Did you have a close relationship with your mother, Linda Carmen?
I would say that I did, yes.
When asked to respond to claims that he lied to police during their interviews with him in 2013, Nathan clams up.
How often did you lie to the Windsor Police Department?
There was one inaccurate. I'm pleading the fifth.
Pleading the fifth as to lying to the Windsor Police Department after your grandfather is dead.
That's
what
he
correct?
said.
Okay.
Nathan pleads the fifth 81 times during this deposition.
I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. And I plead the fifth.
Meaning he declines to answer questions to avoid potentially incriminating himself.
I plead the fifth.
That's damaging to Nathan, I think, in the public's mind. Who takes the fifth? You know, mobsters take the fifth. Gang lords take the fifth. Not somebody that's completely innocent.
Nathan Carmen caught a legal break today after a judge tossed out the lawsuit his aunts had filed to keep him from collecting millions of dollars from his grandfather's estate.
The judge dismisses the case after he rules John Chocolos wasn't a resident of New Hampshire.
The newspapers reported it as a tremendous win for Nathan. I wasn't too troubled by it.
Nathan is off the hook for his family lawsuit, but his insurance case is looming, and investigators have him in their sight.
Pieces of the puzzle had started to come together.
There were too many inconsistencies.
There's no such thing as a perfect crime.
Nathan Carmen and his insurer head to court in Providence, Rhode Island, battling it out in what would be Nathan's biggest legal challenge yet.
Was Nathan at fault for the sinking of his boat, or was he owed a payday?
Nathan Carmen and his lawyer saying absolutely nothing, heading to Providence Federal Court this morning for the first day of the civil trial against Carmen.
He's got everything to lose here. If the court determines that he is negligent in his mother's death, that can open up the potential for criminal charges. Nathan at times was very agitated during the trial, but he was also very active, always leaning over and having conversations with his attorney. And he was right in the thick of things.
He takes the stand, sticking to his story of what happened on that boat. What was he like on the stand?
He is very articulate when he wants to be, very exacting, but also very evasive.
Nathan had no emotion when he testified. That may be because he is on the autism spectrum. And he talked about his mother in a way that she was more of a nuisance than she was a help to him while that boat was going down.
The judge asked him, "What's going on with your mother during all this time?" And Nathan's peculiar answer was, "My mother was part of the problem rather than the solution to a sinking boat."
With the case now in the judge's hands, Nathan talks to the media outside the courthouse.
This isn't about money. It's an $85,000 claim. I almost feel like I have a responsibility to my mom to make sure that the truth comes out.
At the end of the trial, the judge rules that Nathan was negligent with regard to the sinking of the chicken pox.
That was a small victory for me because at least a little bit of justice was prevailing through it all.
The civil case acted as the de facto criminal case. FBI investigators, Coast Guard investigators, attorneys, prosecutors, they all had front row seats.
Now it transitioned to his house in Vermont.
Pieces of the puzzle had started to come together and had started to paint a picture for us that this was in fact a criminal act.
There were too many inconsistencies. There were too many things that just didn't add up.
It became very, very clear that Nathan had committed a crime on the high seas.
We don't have a body, we don't have a boat, so it's a very, very difficult case to try to prove. The grand jurors have to decide, is there enough evidence to proceed and indict?
It took several years, but Nathan Carmen is now charged with killing his mother.
Nathan agrees to meet with investigators, but has no clue what's about to happen.
Nathan was surprised when he was advised that he was under arrest for the murder of Linda Carmen.
It was like something out of the golden age of piracy. Nathan was charged with murder on the high seas.
According to an indictment, Carmen devised a scheme to defraud his grandfather's estate and to obtain money from the trust, and the murders were part of this scheme.
However, the indictment doesn't charge Nathan with the murder of John Chocolos.
Medical records, school records.
Nathan hires defense attorney Marty Manella.
Marty Manella is a long-time, very bulldogged litigator, and when he met Nathan, he not only found a client, but he found a son.
He had literally no support. That was probably the hardest thing that Nathan had to endure, the fact that he had no one. But he had us. He really had us. And I had never in 50 years of practicing law had that kind of relationship with a client. Never.
As he's escorted into federal court for arraignment, cameras catch Nathan defiantly proclaiming his innocence.
Not guilty.
Before pleading not guilty to the court as well.
During Nathan's detention hearing, his aunts read a letter to the judge saying that if you let him go, they would be in fear for their life.
I was very relieved that Nathan was going to be put behind bars. If Nathan was not arrested and not contained, I really think he would have gone on a murder spree.
For years, Nathan had lived in solitude in Vermont. He had never threatened anyone. So to me, it was unusual that they were in fear of what?
The court sides with his aunts and denies Nathan's bail, setting a trial date for October 2nd, 2023. Marty and his team get to work.
It was a huge undertaking, and it was a daily, 7-day-a-week thing. It really became part of our lives.
Nathan was incredibly active in his defense. Every waking hour when he wasn't in his jail cell, he was at the prison library, poring over legal books.
This case was his whole life. He wanted his day in court. He wanted to clear his name.
The day of June 15th, 2023, came as a shock. They were just a few months away from trial.
We've learned Nathan Carmen has died while awaiting a trial for his mother's death.
I got a call in the morning. Nathan was gone, and he hung himself. And I just cried.
Nathan took his own life. He wasn't depressed. He wasn't despondent. We were all looking forward to that October date so that we could have this trial.
Despite all the family court battles and accusations, Nathan's aunts come to pay their respects at his funeral.
I attended Nathan's funeral. Myself and my sisters were there. I was very sad.
Nathan's attorney paid for the funeral, paid for his cremation, and then gave his eulogy.
Non-violent and loving young man. Sleep with the angels, my dear friend. It was probably the toughest thing I ever did because it was like losing a family member. May sound crazy. You lose cases, you lose clients, but you don't have that kind of contact that we had with this person.
I think he is both a victim and a villain in his own story. Nathan Carmen remains an enigma.
The criminal charges against Nathan were dismissed. So in the eyes of the law, Nathan is an innocent man still today.
Months after Nathan Carmen's funeral, a Connecticut judge officially declares his mom, Linda, deceased 7 years after she disappeared at sea. The Windsor Police Department tells 2020 that John Chocolos's murder case is still active.
What I'd like people to remember about my dad, he was kind, he was loving, he'd give you a hard time, but he always did it out of love. Linda was so kind and generous to her friends and the people around her. And I remember all the good times that Linda and I had.
What do you want people to know and remember about your Uncle John?
He's a guy that did it himself. I mean, I loved that guy, you know, and he loved me.
How much do you miss him all these years later?
Every day. Yep. We went to the cemetery today. Nathan's got a stone there, next to my uncle. Why is he buried there? There's no stone there for my cousin Linda. Where's her stone?
Nathan should be remembered as a troubled soul. I'm happy, I'm relieved that Nathan was buried in the family plot next to my dad. Nathan, the child, belongs where he is. He needs to rest.
That's our program for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm Deborah Roberts.
And I'm David Muir from all of us here at 2020 and ABC News. Good night.